What's up? YouTube intro, Tears of the Kingdom. You're a small child. Alright. So I've finished a second playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom, almost 100%, right? Like the quest, the unique items, the like meaningful stuff, right? Not the Koroks or the stuff that's just there to waste your time. But I went ahead and made a category for weapons, a tier list for weapons. We got all the major types, right? Because this could be a video of apples give you 1 damage. Palm fruit gives you 1 damage, right? But that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about how actually useful individual stuff is, right? So the first thing is the 4 categories of weapons, right? And I'm just going to be honest. I think one-handed are good. They're fast. They have a good high base damage most of the time. I think two-handeds are more gimmicky. You need to have a certain type of modifier on the weapon itself, or just get something really weird for a two-handed weapon to really be worth it. And that spears and halberds are the best melee option. But let's do this. Bows. Yeah, we'll just make it white. Bows are in a league of their own. I would say that in the late game, like, a wooden bow that you would have picked up on the Great Sky Island is, like, still a valuable weapon in your arsenal. Even in the late game, when you're fighting, like, silver enemies and Lynels, the power of bows is just completely unmatched. Bullet time is ridiculously broken in this game. It is absurd how good bows are. I'm not joking either. I think that, like, a 4 damage wooden bow in the late game when you have, like, a full arsenal and attachments is more valuable than, like, almost any weapon. Just because of how powerful stunning enemies is and how easy bullet time is to achieve. Not even rocket shielding necessarily, just jumping. There's just tons of obstacles in any situation in the game where you can just run and jump and then just shoot anything. And I mean, like, even if your bow's range sucks, there are things that help with that. So bows are completely on top in terms of combat in this game. I did include shields because it just turns into how strong is the weapon. Because you lose all of the weapon's properties when it's turned into a shield. It just does the raw damage in a bash. So it's like, yeah, you can attach like a Royal Guard Claymore to it and bash 10 times, but that's not really... The power of shields is more in utility in this game. But yeah, that's my ranking. The main reason that two-handed is bad is because it's slow, and most of the power of any weapon is going to come on the attachment, except for gimmicks, which is why we put two-handed here. But yeah, one-handed is pretty easy to understand, right? Spears are just devastating because you get the range of like a two-handed weapon, like even better range. They're faster, and with weapon attachments, you can get them to be comparable to the other ones. So there's no reason to ever fundamentally use a one-handed weapon over a spear. Like if you get a good enough spear. The next up, these 3 are the modifiers. I think attack up is obviously good. I think durability up is the best, and I think long throw is bad. I mean, there's not much to really talk about. The argument is mainly whether durability up or attack up is better. Attack up can go to plus 10. It was nerfed from Breath of the Wild. Personally, I think it's good. I think that if you get attack up, you should treat the weapon as more frail, but still, so just put something that isn't quite as valuable on it and just go nuts with it. Whereas I think durability up weapons are what you put like Lionel parts on, and more valuable things like Silver Alfalfa horns that are like really cool, you know? Or Gleeok horns. You'd rather put that on a durability up, whereas with attack up, it's more so like just throw on the strongest bokoblin part you have. But it's still useful. Long throw is terrible. You throw your weapon 1 time. So it's basically like, imagine if you had a weapon that only had attack up on the last hit, but there was no way to circumnavigate it like Royal Guard weapons. Like, long throw is atrociously bad. Long throw is I'm honestly kind of upset long throw is in the game. Because it really does just make getting good weapons harder. It's just there so that your weapons are worse consistently, it feels like. Alright. Next up, this next good bit is just the weapon types. So not the attachments, but the types. So damage dealing weapons are good. This would be traveler's weapons. Not roasted weapons. This would be... yeah, just traveler's weapons. Big Goron sword, I guess. Fierce Deity sword. Sword of the Hero. Sword of the White Sky. Dust Claymore. Just weapons that just flatly deal damage. I guess because you could have a weapon with a type that it's technically bad. But it doesn't feel right to put it next to long throw. Next up are fragile weapons. These are weapons that at the point in the game that you get them, they're meant to be more powerful than other weapons. But they're extremely fragile to make up for it. So in the early game, like the Great Sky Island, you have rusted weapons, which are dealing more damage than Zonite and wooden parts, right? But the gimmick is they're frail. And this is sort of what happens when you get into the overworld. You move on to gloom weapons, which are the same thing. And the way you're supposed to use them is to just pick them up and either use them on their own so as not to waste a part, or put a less powerful part on there but still get a good sword. So it's like kind of bad, but okay. I don't think it's good by any means, right? But it's still okay. Put it more in gimmick territory. Taking like a gloom weapon and attaching like a Gibdo bone to it makes a really powerful throw. But that I consider that more gimmicky. Zonite weapons are essentially upgrades to damage. They cap out in the like 60s. It's really hard to get them stronger than that, I think. I don't even know if you can. But they have the fuse bonus where they get specifically stronger when you fuse their own parts to them. So that's technically a unique effect, but it's really just a late game. They're your replacement to Traveler weapons. They're just not too hard to obtain. Easy set spawn locations you can fast travel to. Getting Flux 3 and Captain 4 horns isn't too impossible. And you don't need Captain 4 horns for upgrades, so you can pretty freely start putting those on every Zonite weapon. They're just your late game, like, you can have a ton of these no matter how you play the game. They're just really abundant. Next up is the Boomerang type, which I think is more gimmicky. But I do think that it is legitimately powerful if you put the right thing on it. But in general, I think the Boomerang thing is gimmicky. The few times I've tried to use it, it seems to get stuck on terrain really easily. It gets stuck on enemies really easily too. It's not that consistent, but I'm also not the YouTuber that is playing this and like doing bomb shielding into like puff shroom bullet time. You know, I'm not doing that stuff. So maybe boomerangs are the most powerful weapon in the game, and I just don't know it. The Master Sword is like the end game improved version of Zonite because it just recharges on its own and it's constantly powerful. 40 durability is pretty good, considering that it will never go above that. The actual power of the Master Sword is that around gloom enemies, and gloom, or just gloom enemies, so like depths, mini bosses, depths, camps, and Phantom Ganon, the Master Sword is incredibly powerful. I think it's better than Zonite because of that. You can also technically get the Master Sword incredibly early into a run. All you have to do is run over, get the second wheel of stamina, which, depending on how quickly you do the temples, you can technically do with, like, I think, like 10 shrines or something? Or 12 shrines, because I think you can technically get 12, do the Wind Temple, which activates the Bargainer statue, and then trade out the 2 hearts you got for wheels, and that's all you need. You can get it really quickly. But the Master Sword is essentially early game the reason why the depths are like explorable. If you accidentally overlevel yourself, like if you accidentally make Black Bokoblins spawn before your health is ready to take them on, the Master Sword can kind of give you an even playing ground there. Even into the late game, the Master Sword's utility is pretty good. Let's say that you're hunting down Flame Lizalfos, you can just put an ice part on your sword and just one-shot all of them. easier to do with a bow, but it still has utility. Yeah, Master Sword is also 30 power, which is about where most non-pristine weapons cap out, and most pristine weapons start into the late game. So let's say you're fighting an enemy. Let's just say you're in the depths. You've basically got like, with like 30 damage power attachment, which is pretty common in the late game, you've basically got like a 70 power sword that's got 40 hits. It's pretty good, but it's not the best. Let's not kid ourselves. Magical rods are like really gimmicky. I don't understand the point of them really for combat, right? Everyone insists magical rods are really powerful in combat, but I've never really been able... I don't really see the value in them when you can have those attachments on a rod, the gems to weapons. But I might just be missing something, and I'm fully willing to admit that. But I still think boomerangs have a higher potential, because you can put the elemental on the boomerang. Soldiers' weapons are really strong. I guess we should keep it organized by like yeah, like that. Okay. So where are we at? Soldier weapons? They have a surprisingly good durability. At least it feels like it. The gimmick is that when you use a soldier's weapon, it charges faster. So if you use a sword or a spear, you can get your first charge in I think like less than a second. And you can get to a full charge in, I want to say, like 2 seconds. It's ridiculous how fast the power attack is on soldier weapons. Which, late game, when you can attach something really good to a soldier's weapon, it becomes devastating. Soldiers' weapons with frost attachments shred up gloom hands pretty easily. It's pretty good. Soldiers' weapons are also just good for fodder enemies, like bokoblins, which have, like, unpredictable attack patterns. And I don't mean, like oh, it's hard, it's like a Lionel. It's like, they literally can just randomly start up an attack, so having a ranged weapon for them in the late game is nice. Soldiers' weapons are super fun. The claymores do function differently. They consume less stamina instead of charging faster, but that means you get more damage off per power attack cycle. It's ridiculous. Soldiers' weapons are really heavily slept on. They're really fun to use. Night weapons are gimmicky. I think we'll just keep them in gimmick. Taking a drink. I think early game, it's really easy to use these. Because, like, it's 2 hearts anyways, and you just have to be really careful. But I think into the late game, once enemies show up that have, like, elemental attacks and, like, archers, there's so much that, like, not getting hit, and everything is going to take a heart late game, right? Especially in the depths. I just don't think it's worth it. But I don't think it's bad. I think it's a gimmick. Royal weapons are genuinely good, though. I think they're definitely better than Zonite, because they're comparable in damage with attachments anyways. But I think that because Flurry Rushes can be inconsistent to activate, I do think that they're going to go below Soldier and Master Sword, but they're really incredibly good. They're pretty good. Flurry Rushes are not impossible to activate by any means. I'm really bad at video games and I've gotten Flurry Rushes. And the increased damage is nice, but it doesn't reduce the durability hits, so if you spend the work to get like a Flurry Rush off and you only have like 6 hits, it kind of sucks, and that's really annoying. In general, though, I think that it is good. Not to mention they're just good base weapons. I think that they're actually... Even the decayed versions are pretty comparable to, like, gnarled weapons. They're just really good in general. You're probably going to see them the most throughout your playthrough. Royal Guard weapons are not good. They are the king of gimmicks. Which I'm almost tempted to put them in, like, I'm almost tempted to just put them at the bottom of good because of the one use they have. So you've heard this before, but Lionels don't take damage when you mount them. So in theory, you can create like a 700 power weapon that's one hit away from shattering and just use it on a Lionel and just kill like a silver Lionel in 10 hits. But that's like one specific niche use, and it's kind of boring to do that after a while. I've only played through the game twice, and I'm already kind of sick of fighting Lionels that way, and I would rather just take the hits or try to block or dodge because it's more engaging. But yeah, actually, you know what? Because it's not as fun, we're going to put it at the top of gimmick. It's really powerful, though. You can create some insane weapons with the Royal Guard Claymore. I don't like Rito weapons, man. So, the Eightfold Blade is on here because it's different. I guess we can talk about the Eightfold Blade now, because the Eightfold Blade is good. It's honestly, yeah, okay. So Rito weapons just send your enemies flying, which like isn't that useful if you want to like kill them and take their parts, which is like the point of the game. I don't understand the point of Rito weapons really. It's more like for personal enjoyment. Like if you want to just throw a bokoblin off a cliff instead of like kill them. But you do you. Eightfold Blades are different because the wind it sends off physically attacks the opponent. And you can actually change the wind type to be different elements depending on certain weapons and certain attachments. An Eightfold Blade with a frost attachment shreds Gloom Hands. It absolutely annihilates them. Even better than like soldiers' weapons do. The Eightfold Blade is really fun to use. I thought it was really bad at first, but it's the elemental attachment that matters. But I'm still not going to put it above the Royal or Master Sword. Goron weapons have the benefit of being crushing type weapons, or blunt, either way that you want to put it, which is double damage against rock type enemies. So armor, armored Lionels are notable. Frocks, so like white frocks in particular, taluses, they're not ever that hard, but it'll speed up those fights. But all Goron weapons are two-handed. So it's like, it's honestly just kind of bad. I think the problem is that you can put the crushing type attachment onto a weapon and get the same result. Unless I'm mistaken, if attaching like a boulder to a Goron weapon gives it 4 times power against 4 enemies, then maybe. And I also think that is more valuable than the Rito weapon, but just in general, it's yeah, actually, you know what? I guess as far as this goes, like, it is better than damage because it's dealing bonus damage on certain types of enemies. It's the Boomerang Magical Rod problem. It's like, you can put crushing type on any of these. So, I don't really know why you would. Sword weapons are the best type of the game. Now, I would probably rather use... Oh man, I'm getting all the good voice cracks today. I would probably rather use a soldier's weapon in more combat scenarios, right? Because it's like funner to use, and they're easier to obtain, and they're easier to use. But Zora weapons have 3 traits about them that I think make them the most powerful. One is certain areas passively buff you. If you're in a cave that has drip, you know, where the walls are all slippery, you're automatically at full power, right? No side on needed. 2, unlike Gerudo weapons, Zora weapons keep their durability modifier when you fuse weapon attachments to them, and Zora weapons are some of the most durable in the game. The Lightscale Trident in particular has the highest durability of any weapon in the game. The Lightscale Trident is also a spear, which is very powerful. And 3, they're still usable without it. So even if you're just like too lazy to go activate Sidon, which you can do preemptively during a battle, you don't actually have to do it during one, you can just use it. And like a Silver Lionel attachment to any Zora weapon is still like 60 damage, which is, you know, like what these are reaching. So it's incredible. These also buff the base weapon when they're wet. So unlike Gerudo, which just doubles the attachment, the Zora weapon, which can go up to I think like 25 with the two-handed weapons, will go up to 50. So 50 plus double silver Lionel Horn. A Claymore from the Zora would be doing like what? 150 damage. And you can get, unlike this one, which you basically just have like Lionels, you can use this on anything. Zora weapons are really powerful. I don't think that's that controversial. I don't think anyone will really argue that. The only thing is it is annoying to constantly have to try and activate Sidon because of how poorly they designed the champion abilities. Or I'm sorry, the sage abilities. They're so different. But, yeah, Zora weapons are on top. Second only to bows. Although I guess technically there are Zora bows, so... Gerudo weapons are definitely up here. I actually think they probably are better than soldier weapons because you can just pull them out on any enemy with no prep either. The only problem is they have no durability. They're like fragile weapons, but they're just insanely strong to make up for it. I think the evolution is supposed to be Rusty, Gloom, Gerudo. And it kind of makes sense. Gerudo weapons are nuts. I prefer a soldier's weapon, but I don't have a problem either way you organize the two of these. I believe the Schmidtmar of the 7 has some of the highest base weapon durability in the game. It just gets no fuse modifier. So, like, the Lightscale Trident only has, like, 50 or something, but it adds the 25. I think this one starts out with, like, 30 or something. It's just that you can't add to it. I don't know specifically, but that is the strongest and most durable Gerudo weapon. Pristine ones seem to last for about as long as an unfused weapon would. I mean, duh, but I think still the raw durability of the soldier's weapon with a good attachment is better. Even though you can speed up battles, you can realistically do that with a royal weapon and just take more hits. But it's definitely funner to do with a Gerudo weapon. Gerudo weapons can also act as your Royal Guard gimmick or Zora gimmick before you're able to obtain those if you just happen to go to the Gerudo region or the Gerudo depths. Which the game will actually advise you to, because after you do the Rito village, you're encouraged to go seek out Koga. So, you'll actually probably reach Gerudo weapons before Royal Guard or Zora weapons. In that respect, they're really useful. But I think late game I would prefer durability up soldier weapons. Forest Dwellers are gimmicks, but they are reliable gimmicks. We'll talk more about why Forest Dweller weapons aren't really that good when we get to attachments. We already went over the long blade. No, this is... Yeah, okay. So that's the Eagle long blade. So this is the sneak strike weapon. Which is actually really... It's the exact middle between good and gimmick. We'll just put it below Zonite. No, I think Eightfold Blade has to be in gimmick because it's relying on something else other than itself to kind of work. But I guess at that point Zora weapons kind of are too, so I'm not sure. Oh, I think we'll leave Eightfold Blade there. Eightfold Blade weapons are really good because they deal double damage on a Sneak Strike, which already deals an insane multiplier. With the Silver Lionel attachment, I think you can sneak attack kill any black enemy and most silver enemies. It's really powerful. But in a normal situation, you get it once per battle. However, with Puff Shrooms, you can get like a Sneak Strike on a camp. It's a little tedious to fight this way. It's not very fun, but it is efficient. I think we'll just have to flat out call it good, because Puff Shrooms are abundant. Alright, so these are now weapon attachments. Damage is good. I mean, fucking duh, right? Crushing is good. It's technically better than damage. The only thing is that once you turn a weapon into, I believe, a sledge or a pulverizer, it will slow down the attack animations. So against ore enemies, it's strictly better, but against normal enemies, I think the DPS on bladed weapons is better. But the difference in power is usually not enough to really... Like, I think a silver Lionel Mace Horn is like 51, and then the Saber is 55. It's like, okay. Alright, Boomer. It's like, what's the argument here? I think Crushing is just strictly better. It also breaks armor, which is really valuable. It means you don't have to bust out like some weird strategy where you have to run away and hit them with a bomb. You can just bring out your sledgehammer and just break someone's armor. Next up is Bone, which is good. Bone actually does end up outpacing damage. It's more gimmicky, but you don't just have to create the one Bone Proficiency Royal Guard Claymore. You can put Bone Proficiency and attack up and stack that with the Molduga Jaw on anything. The only problem is, I do think that Lionel Horns... Yeah, Lionel Horns start out stronger and can go on more weapons. Well, it comes out weird, but the Molduga Jaw is like the best attachment in the game that you can repeatedly get. Even without the weird Royal Guard Claymore setup, the Molduga Jaw is just really powerful. It's not the best attachment, though, but it is the best common attachment you can get. It is definitely the most powerful attachment you can get, too, which is important to note. And it's also considered, I believe, blunt or crushing, which means that it by default gets that bonus, too. The whip is not gimmicky, but the problem is the strongest one you can get is really weak. So it's just asking, do you want range on your weapons at the cost of power? Which, like, actually, yeah, that is kind of gimmicky. It's probably better than night weapons and, like, forest dweller weapons. No, actually, it's bad. Because you can get all the range you want with a bow and a spear. And at that point, trying to add on to your swords is probably not worth it. Especially considering that the whip is limited to being strongest on a silver Lizalfos. Which just isn't strong. It's just not that strong. It doesn't compete with the late game attachments of like silver and white Lionels and like Molduga parts and all that. But it is fun. I've added a whip to my Master Sword before and it was really fun to use. It just wasn't that strong. It's incredibly fun to use though. So don't take it personally if you're like the biggest whip advocate in the game. Fire is weird. It one-shots too many enemies for me to call it anything less than good, but I don't understand why you would use fire over electricity or ice. Ice is the best attachment in the game. There's just too many situations where freezing your enemy is just too valuable. Like, you're dealing with Gloom Hands, you just freeze them all. I mean, that's that. You're fighting like a horde of enemies, you freeze them all, that's that. You're fighting one kind of tough enemy and you freeze them, and that's that. The only situation where ice isn't useful is against mini-bosses, but even then ice is actually useful against Igneo and Flame Gleox, which are mini-bosses. So ice, it actually still has application in mini-bosses. Incredibly valuable against Gloom Hands, which, like, for all intents and purposes are mini-bosses. They literally despawn all the other enemies in the game when they come out. You do still get a damage bonus from ice, because once you freeze them, the next hit does bonus damage, so it still gets the elemental damage bonus on top of affecting how you fight the enemy. Yeah, in general, I think that the best common weapon you can make in the game for the most scenarios would be the Light Scale Trident with Frost Gleoc Horn. But the damage is a little lacking, but that's made up for by the Zora ability. You can also use ice. You can like put ice fruits on your bows, which I mean is pretty obviously like absolutely insane in bullet time. You can freeze every enemy on the ground in bullet time and then land and finish them all off with like a soldier's weapon, one at a time, if you wanted to. Ice weapons on Yiga Longblades are nuts. Ice weapons on the Master Sword is really powerful because of how durable it is. The only weapon that doesn't benefit from ice that much is Soldier. Like, the rapid damage will burn through all your ice charges. So you do have to be using, like, a permanent ice weapon, like Dragon Horns or Gleeok Horns, to get the most out of it on a Soldier's weapon. But, yeah, you can create some really powerful ice weapons. Electric is pretty good. It seems to flatly deal the most damage out of the elements. But I do think the strongest element you get for electricity is the Gleeok. And I don't know that it deals enough to really compete with Silver Lionel Horns, unfortunately. Yeah, because Thunder Gleeoks are also about as much work to farm as Lionels, so I don't really see it as being much more worth it. I guess, technically, late game, they're easier to farm, because they have, like, weak spots and all that. Water weapons are just like fire. They're too strong against certain types of enemies, but in general, they're a gimmick. They also don't get you wet. You have to kind of get creative to get yourself wet with the Opal and Splash Fruit, and it's tedious at that point. Just use Sidon. I want to say that if you bash an enemy and then touch them, you'll get wet, but I haven't tested that. It was never worth it to attach Opal to any of my shields when I had Sidon. So, water also just has a surprisingly small amount of attachments. I don't even know if Choo Choo Jelly counts as water. I don't think it does. I know Elemental Choo Choo Jelly counts as the other elements, but I don't know if it actually affects base Choo Choo Jelly as water. Light is a gimmick. It's really powerful against stall enemies, and that's it. But at that point, just throw a Dazzle Fruit. Don't waste a Star Fragment on your fucking staff, please. When you need fucking, like, 100 Star Fragments to max your armor. Bouncy is a gimmick, but it's useful on more enemies. At that, just kill them. It's purely you're doing it for fun. Wind is bad. Bees! Bees are so fun. They get to go up in gimmick tier. Bees do no damage to late game enemies, but they're so fun. And they are useful distractions. So you know what? They're higher than light. You know what? Bees are the best gimmick. One-use items. Yeah, so like apples deal 1 damage and then break. Bombs explode and then break, and they also shred your weapon's durability, and they take your health. Puff Shrooms do their thing and then they break. Muddle Buds do their thing and then they break. I think you're seeing the pattern here. And I think that they're mostly gimmicky. Just use bows. Forest Dweller's weapons kind of make it better, but not really. There's like maybe this exact scenario that you explore the depths under the woodland area first out of everywhere. So early game your fire fruit gets to be a little bit more useful. And you can actually use this with Puff Shroom to get the 8-fold blade to be incredibly powerful. So actually we're going to bump one use up to here. Yeah, just use it on a 4-star weapon and then switch to 8-fold, but that's really tedious. That's like actually probably more tedious to do than just getting a Zora weapon ready and charging in. Oh, whoa. Didn't mean to do that. Go up. Go up. Arrow attachments. Eyes are good. And wings are the best. When you get up to, I believe, the Molduga and Gleeok wings, they will literally travel straight even during wind currents and windstorms. They get really powerful. I believe Gleeok wings do enough damage that you can take like a normal like Traveler's bow and attach them and beat Colgera in 12 hits. If you're willing to use 12 Gleeok wings. But yeah, Gleeok wings are really fun to use. They're incredibly powerful in that. I don't know where I would put Gibdo bones because they kind of feel like their own exact thing, and ancient arrows. But I mean, those are both pretty self-explanatory. They're just good. They're damage. You know, it's not much difference. Ancient arrows are a little more questionable because you actually do lose your loot. Your epic loot crate. Oh man. My brain is fried. I'm trying to wrap this up. Ancient arrows actually aren't that good in this game because you want to pick up everything from an enemy you kill. So essentially, ancient arrows are just slightly stronger Gibdo bones for bosses that are like harder to get. And then against everything else, they're actually kind of detrimental. So I don't think ancient blades would go very higher. And Gibdo bones are just damage. So there's already a thing for damage on weapon modifiers, so there's not much point. There are 48 million billion. You know what, actually? I guess one use actually applies to bows too. So I think one use actually bumps up because of bows, but one use on weapons is still gimmicky, but one use on bows is good because you fire arrows one at a time. This isn't controversial, I don't think. What's the most controversial thing I said on here? Probably that Rito weapons suck. The fact that I put crushing so high, but I put Goron weapons in bad is probably gonna like make people mad. Let's see here. Everyone's gonna argue about electric being better than ice. They're gonna be mad that Royal Guard is down here. That's probably it, right? Yeah, Forest Willow and Royal Guard might be the biggest thing that people yell at me for. I do think briefly it's worth discussing. The reason that honestly spears are so overpowered in Tears of the Kingdom is fuse. Just flatly, there's no reason to use a two-handed weapon when the base damages are so close anyways because of how they changed weapons. That you really are just playing how you prefer, and spears are just objectively the strongest in the game. They stun enemies the easiest, they have the longest range, which makes them safer to use. They also have a better charge attack. They tend to have really good durability. Although I do believe in general two-handed weapons are more durable, so I'll take that. Two-handed weapons are also useful more out of combat than in because of the fact that any two-handed weapon with a rock attachment breaks world ore, so like gem deposits and rock sediments in one hit. So that's really useful. Getting like a sturdy thick stick and a boulder will just destroy any cave. But that's not really combat related, right? And we're ranking weapons. Because a lot of these weapons have really interesting properties for like overworld stuff, which is where a lot of people are probably going to wonder why I didn't mention it, but like the wind modifiers allow you to like make boats if you somehow aren't able to get across it in any other way in the game with vehicles. I guess that's pretty useful. Your Master Sword is infinitely more useful as a tool than as a weapon. The Master Sword with like a black bokoblin horn, which is like overly abundant in the late game, breaks any ore thing in one hit. So you can break 40 things of ore with it in one cycle, which is useful for the depths with Zonite, with how many Zonite things are around the caves. Like late game when your weapons are just better than even an enhanced Master Sword. It's pretty useful. Soldiers' weapons are surprisingly good excavation tools. A pristine soldier's claymore will tear through caves too. Even better than sturdy thick sticks. Or gnarled thick sticks. A pristine durability up soldier's claymore with like a boulder attachment is like nuts for clearing caves. I wish long throw had a purpose. The only instance where I think long throw is good is if you use it in tandem with boomerang. But even then, I don't know. I think I would prefer durability up or attack up on a boomerang even then. Unless you're just purely using the boomerang with ice to freeze enemies and you don't care about how many hits it takes. That's possible. I'm giving bees way too much credit. They're so fun to use though. It's so goofy to like just charge at someone and then smack them with bees. I think bees are more fun to use than the fucking Forest Dweller Puff Shroom sniper setup. It's honestly funnier to take a magic rod and put bees on it than it is to do these other weird things. But yeah. That'll probably be it. This is a non-creative person's weapon tier list from Tears of the Kingdom. A game all about creativity, so yeah, please eat me alive in the comments. You know what? Actually, I think yeah. I think we're gonna change that. One-use items with bows are the best combination. Like ice fruit, fire fruit, shock fruit, splash fruit, muddle bud, puff shroom, bomb flowers. It's too much. Gibdo bones. It really is too strong to not put it there. But yeah, bows are the strongest weapon in the game. I'm not kidding. I literally have run out of bows before and then picked up like a weak construct bow. And it's like as valuable in combat as like some of these late game weapons I made, like Soldier Spear, Colgera Jaw combinations, like Captain Fuller Zonite Spears. You know, like Gerudo Schmidtmar with like Silver Lizalfo's Horn. Silver, yeah, all that, and like weak bows are on a comparable level. Bows are just ungodly strong in this game. If they make the next Zelda in this engine, I really want them to nerf bows. Bows are too strong in this game. Bows are nuts. Banjo-Kazooie, nuts and bolts. Alright, bye.